if forgiveness doesn't mean going back? What if healing actually requires distance? Today, we're sitting down with Eva Marie Everson to unpack one of the most misunderstood topics in faith-based spaces. How do you forgive someone who deeply hurt you without reopening the door to more pain? If you've ever struggled with guilt around boundaries, this conversation may completely shift your perspective on forgiveness, healing, and what the scriptures may actually be saying. And stay with us until the end. We'll tell you how you can win a copy of Eva Marie Everson's new book. Have you ever felt something was wrong but couldn't explain it? Like the person you love was slowly chipping away at your sense of self?
We've been there. Different marriages, but to the same man, with the same toxic pattern. But God was still working.
We're Lizzie and Dina, women of faith, survivors, and truth tellers.
Surviving toxic relationships is for any woman stuck in confusion, healing after betrayal, or searching for her voice again.
You are not crazy.
You are deeply loved. Hey everybody, welcome back to the next episode of Surviving Toxic Relationships. Today we're so excited to have Eva Marie Everson. She is a multiple award-winning author and speaker who hails from the picturesque southern town of Sylvania, Georgia. She is also the CEO of Word Weavers International and the director of Florida Christian Writers Conference. Eva Marie enjoys coaching new authors through her company. So welcome so much, Eva Marie. We're so happy to have you today. And I will start by saying, I read your book. I know it's not out yet, but you did give us a nice sneak peek, which I'm so grateful for. And as I told you before we recorded, I could not put it down. I devoured it so much so because there were so many questions that I had, and there were so many little twists and turns and plots that I needed to know. And my husband had a sandwich for dinner. But let's talk about you. So go ahead and feel free to introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about you and maybe even your life and your beginnings.
Well, everything you said is true. I am owned by a cat named Vanessa. Vanessa was actually my brother's cat. He found her at a dumpster, and sadly, about 7 years ago, he passed away from cancer. So he was so concerned about that cat. He was more concerned about the cat than anything. And I promised him that I would take care of her. So she moved in with my husband and me. And honestly, she has taken over this house. She's taken over my husband. I think they might have something going on the side. I'm just not real sure. But like she hides. If he's not here, she kind of hides. And then as soon as he walks in the door, she comes running out and just jumps into his arms. It's disgusting. So it's really kind of cute. But she definitely runs the show. That's what cats do. But I grew up in this small southern town, Sylvania, Georgia, which is not too far outside of Savannah. And was born in the 50s and grew up in the late 50s, all through the 60s, earliest part of the 70s. It was a great time to be alive. It truly was. I mean, if I look back on it, I think, wow, those were hard years because, of course, we had all this wholesome goodness, and then we had Vietnam, and we had all the upheaval that was going on in the world during that time. But we had great music. We had great films, and I don't know, life was simpler. We had muscle cars and good friends. I was part of the Jesus Revolution. Really, I grew up in the church, but came to understand my walk with Christ during the Jesus Revolution. And so it was a good life. And I went on to become a nurse and married my husband. We've just celebrated 47 years. So my husband
That's beautiful.
says if I keep up the good work, he'll keep me for one more year. He's a hoot.
Well, that's wonderful. It's so rare to hear people that have made the distance like that. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about your family, your core relationships.
Yeah. Well,
Parents, siblings.
I grew up, mother, father, brother. There were just the four of us, and now there's just the one of me, which in all honesty is very difficult. It's a very odd feeling to know that you're the last one, and also that you don't have anyone now that you can share certain memories with. There are times when I think, was that when we went to Uncle so-and-so's, or were we? And I think I want to pick up the phone and call either my brother, my mother, my father, and then I realized, oh my goodness, they're gone. And in fact, my father has been gone 20 years, and my mother 16 years, my brother 7 years. So, but it just seems like they're always right there with you. I married a man with two children and got to be a part of their lives and them a part of mine. And I just call them my kids, because when you raise them. So then we had a child of our own. And so now we have the three children. And like you said, the world's greatest grandkids. We have wonderful grandchildren and they're all just doing great. But that doesn't mean life was always easy. It was not always easy. And you come through some tough times. And I draw on that in my writing. I started writing when I was about 40 years old. Well, I actually wrote long before that, but I started writing professionally at 40, and I'm winking at 70 is what I say. I'm winking at it. So that gives you an idea of how long I've been doing this. But you pull on those hardships, and then you pull on the joys as well. And I think all of that is in Miss Beth Betancourt.
Yeah, well represented. And I love that it's a historical fiction type of romance because it's fun to kind of read these books that actually have real references to those time frames. It's kind of a learning experience, but it also, the way that you write, it really pulls you back into the story to where you feel like you're there with them and with the characters. Very well done. That's the good books are the ones that pull you in and you feel like you're in a movie in your mind.
I had so much fun, going back and researching fashion, and I'm kind of a little bit of a classic movie buff anyway. I would rather watch an old movie than anything that's out today. So I, got to pull on that and the old TV shows and even old commercials. I went to YouTube and watched those and actually created a playlist. It's at my website and, at the blog site of my website, and just enjoyed listening to all that and researching all of that, having so much fun with the, just like, again, the fashion. Oh my gosh, women just, you didn't leave the house that you weren't dressed.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think one of my favorite parts was at the end, you get recipes. And because the way that you described the meals that they ate, I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I could go back and get her recipe. And I would just love that. And sure enough, you go in the back and it got all Miss Molly, right? You called her Miss Molly?
Miss Molly May.
Miss Molly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Miss Molly was the character that will just really, you just want to wrap your arms around her. She's just wonderful. But man, those recipes in the end, good job on that. I never even thought that would happen.
I have books that were my mother's, my grandmother's, great aunts, their recipes, and they're handwritten. And so I just pulled from that. I pulled from memory of like the things that my mother would have cooked during those years. And so, they had their 3 meals every day.
Yeah.
I was going to say that's like a free gift with purchase.
Yeah.
I mean, and now that I know this about where you got the recipes, because I thought, oh, she probably just pulled them from all recipes or whatever. But the fact that you got them from handwritten old recipes in the family, and it's those good Southern stick to your ribs recipes, that everybody wants to eat, like smothered chicken, stuff like that. You're like, oh, yes.
And orange chicken. Oh my gosh, it was absolutely, those were 2 of my favorites. And, right before my mother passed away, and she died very suddenly, she died of a brain aneurysm. So there was no warning. I had said to her, the next time I come home, I used to call it messy chicken because you made such a mess. And I was, I said to her, the next time I come home, would you make messy chicken for me? And she said, I sure will. And I never got it. Yeah. Whenever they were eating messy chicken, I was just remembering how delicious it was. I'm not much of a cook, I'll be honest. I'm a baker. I love to bake. So that recipe for pound cake, that's one that was handed down from my grandmother and my mother to me, and then on to my daughter.
Well, I cannot wait to try those recipes. And you listeners out there, I know this is a little different than what we usually talk about because we're generally talking about toxic relationships, but we will get there. We have some questions to ask Eva about her rich, memory-filled life, and we're going to ask her some questions along those lines. But for now, I thought it would just be fun to talk about how you're going to get a lot of great recipes, old Southern, stick to your ribs, good meals, warm, comforting meals that were talked about in the book.
And a good story.
Maybe people should make those recipes while they're reading the book. There you go.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I just got invited to a book club that's local here in the Orlando area, and that's what they're planning to do. They're planning to make some of those recipes, and I even just today sent over an extra one because they were saying they were like confused. We looked up salads, and it seems like they're all sweet and they're not like lettuce. Not a single Southern salad has lettuce, and I'm like, no. Southern salads are sweet salads, and they're popular during spring and summer, sometime into the fall. But no, not the green stuff. So I sent it was one of my favorite recipes of my mother's, and they said they were going to have that. So yeah, that'd be a lot of fun to have book clubs. And I'm certainly, if I'm not in the area, I would be more than happy to join you by Zoom, and I'll just have a piece of fried chicken with you.
I love it. All right, Lizzie, I've been hogging the whole thing. Do you want to ask her a question? Sorry.
Well, I feel like it's not fair because Dina, you've read the book, so you like I felt bad because I was looking forward to reading the book, and and here we are. So I don't feel like you're hogging it. You're just kind of going off your experience.
Like I told Eva, I am a pampered little princess right now, and I get to not work except for this free work that we do. But you're still working full time. So no worries. Okay, so I'll ask you this then, Eva. When the book opens, the main character, Beth, she's been estranged from her identical twin sister, Elise. And actually for over 7 years when Elise actually passes away. But even after her twin sister dies, Beth holds so much anger against her. So tell me about how you feel about our ability as human beings to hold grudges against those who hurt us.
We can certainly do that. It's easier sometimes, we think, to hold a grudge than to forgive. But, there's an old saying about unforgiveness is the poison you pour for someone else and drink yourself. So in the book, and this is just human nature because that's what a novelist will pull from. In the book, Beth is so angry at her sister, she has closed herself off, even to the point when her sister's husband, the widower, has reached out and tried to make amends on behalf of Elise, because this was one of Elise's dying wishes, was make it right with Beth. She will not do it, and she is so cold toward it. And yet she has a lot of love to give. She loves Molly. She loves her parents. She has a kindergarten. She loves those children. But when it comes to anything that goes beyond that, that wall is there. And that is something that didn't happen overnight. It built up until there was one final crushing blow. And she was just like, no more, no more. I will not forgive. I heard something recently that totally resonated with me. There is a difference in forgiving and reconciling. So you can forgive someone who has hurt you, but then understand that the relationship is toxic, as you all talk about in your podcast, and say, I can forgive this person and now I can move on and just not think about it. My husband and I had a toxic relationship, not together, not with each other, somebody else in our lives who was very toxic. And we both had to work toward that. And it was a family member to say, I forgive. I'm leaving this at the footstool of God. I'm just leaving it. And we knew that we truly had done that when we talked about that person and laughed, like something that they had said or done years ago that was funny and lighthearted and back before the relationship became toxic. And we just laughed about it. And I said, oh my gosh, I think we're healed. I really think we're healed because we no longer say that name and go, or have all these negative feelings that come up. Yeah. But there's no desire to have Thanksgiving dinner. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. It's perfect. Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. You don't.
So even with Marty, who is the hero of the story, Marty has every reason to be angry, to be unforgiving, and he has now come to know Christ. He didn't grow up in the church. He did not go to church until he was older, but it's while he is in the army that he meets the Lord and develops his faith and just immediately hands it over to God. And I think some people have that capability more than others. Even though both of them spent their lives having hurt upon hurt upon hurt upon hurt, some people retreat and build the wall and say, I will not allow you to come any further, while others say, giving this to God, I forgive you. Don't want to have Thanksgiving dinner with you, but I forgive you. So I've certainly learned that in my own life. And the longer you live, it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, but it does mean that you start to see those relationships where you say, okay, I have to put a boundary around this one. I love this person, but this person is toxic in my life. And that doesn't mean I don't love you. That doesn't mean I won't pray for you. That doesn't mean that you will not always have a special place in my heart, but you cannot be in my life.
Wow, that's amazing. Because I was just going to ask you about boundaries. I was just going to ask you if this person that you had encountered, if you ended up having to place boundaries around that relationship. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, and more than, in our lives, more than one person, because as I said, I think once you've experienced it to that point where you go, either I am going to build a boundary here, give this over to God, forgive for all the hurt, but keep that boundary in place until you've experienced that. Next time it gets easier and it gets easier. And I'm in ministry and I work with writers. And my joke often is there's a thin line between literary genius and mental illness, and I know where the line is. So, I mean, it's true, And so there are certain people along the way that you meet and you think this person is so dear, but wounded to the point where I cannot allow you to cross that boundary. I can keep you here, but I cannot allow you here because I have a husband and children and grandchildren, and they deserve my protection, not allowing toxicity in.
Yep. I love that. Exactly. And, I had to learn that when I was a manager in healthcare. It was a difficult lesson. I worked in several different hospitals, but at one point I was in charge of 250 different employees. And it was hard for me because I'm such a people person. I'm such a people pleaser, which is obviously why I was in that toxic relationship for 27 years. So I go from that to, marrying the love of my life, who's incredible, but then being a manager over all these people that, many of them are toxic. And I wanted to extend the olive branch so much so to those troublemakers, thinking that if they had the right management, if they had the right tools, if they had what they needed, they would come around and they would come along with the team. Some did, some didn't. But it finally dawned on me that it was like you had mentioned, it was my job to protect the people that were in these roles working alongside them that were just being harassed or, having to do extra work because these people were just going and hiding. And once I understood that protective component needed to happen, instead of constantly placating the people that, are causing the problems, it was much easier to help myself not feel like bad for putting down those professional boundaries, and bringing them in and doing write-ups if needed. Because not only that, but boundaries create order in your life. The lack of boundaries create chaos, like not having a stoplight or stop sign in an intersection. You have to have rules and laws and boundaries for yourself and to protect your family, to protect your children. You don't know what kind of people are going to be influencing your children. So anyway, love it. Well said.
I think too, like when I was developing Beth's character, Beth wanted, and this is one of the things that kind of comes out, Beth wanted to be more like Elise and didn't understand that in actuality, Elise was jealous of her, which while they were identical in looks, they were totally different in personality. And of course, we've all met twins like that. And then I came up with the idea, I have friends who are twins, and one was born shortly before midnight and one was born shortly after midnight. And so I thought, I'm going to use that, and of course, Elise was born first. So she would use that to, just like children will do. I'm older than you are, that kind of thing. But for Beth, it was hurtful. And then to find out later on that her sister was actually jealous of her. She's like, what? So sometimes we have to also reconcile that we don't see it the way the other person sees it. Sometimes there is a coming together and saying, okay. So, for example, she does eventually make some amends, but Marty, even though he's given it completely over in my mind, he will probably never approach his grandmother because that's a relationship that's just not going to work. That's, that's that boundary. He has found that acceptance somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think
But
there's some pain that's just too deep. Somebody in your life, they just crossed the line and it's just too deep. And even if you would want to potentially give them a chance, they are no longer safe. They're like a
yeah.
bomb, about to go off. And so even if you're in their company, you're never going to feel that they care about you. You're never going to feel like they're going to make sure you're okay in the relationship. So they totally made sense. Even in the book, it made complete sense to me.
Yeah, just like what you said, you can hand it over. You can hand it over to God. But I've also discovered in all of my years that some people will say, "How can I change? How can I make this right? I want to prove myself to you." I often think about Paul, the Apostle Paul, back to Jerusalem is like, "Guess what? I've changed," And Peter was like, "I don't think so." And we think more along the lines of who the Apostle Paul was. We forget who he was as Saul. Peter and the other disciples were watching those whom they had brought to Christ being drug out of their homes and slaughtered by this man. And then here he comes. But the thing about it is Paul was like, "I get it. I'm going to go prove myself." And he did. But some people don't want to change. That's
And
not at all in their purview. They are like, "You are wrong, I am right, and I can hurt you all I want." And that's on them, and you're not going to change them. You can only change who you are, and you can only change how they affect you.
yeah.
That's the only thing you got.
I love the imagery and the reminder about Paul and his willingness to change, because that's something that we have observed with many people in these situations. That is a great reminder that a person that truly will change, they will
Mhm.
go, "I know I have
Mhm.
done some deep pain, wounding things that I can understand why you do not trust me at this point," but being willing to over time to change those patterns and direction, because after a while the fruits become evident. But so many of us kind of tend to go back and thinking they may change, or we end up becoming bitter against that person, refusing to ever let them in, and all of
Yeah.
it can be toxic in its own way. But what a great reminder about Paul.
Well, also, and I think one of the things that where we as Christians we think I have to forget, because that's what God does. He forgives and forgets, but we're not God. But then I have to then reestablish a relationship, and that's not necessarily anywhere in Scripture. In fact, I love the story of David and Saul, because David, remember, Saul went into the cave to relieve himself, and David was close enough to cut off the corner of his robe, which was tantamount to taking the crown off of his head. And so then once Saul went out of the cave, David comes out and shows him, "This is how close I was, and I could have killed you." And Saul says, "Oh, my son David, come home. I love you. I will never do it again." And David is like, "Go in peace, my father," so to speak. But David did not go. David stayed on the run. He stayed in the wilderness because he recognized that something's not quite right with Saul. And for David, that would have been toxic. To have returned, he probably would have returned to his death, because Saul could not be trusted at all. So in that moment, Saul felt bad, but he probably would have changed. And David was smart enough and mature enough to recognize it. So yeah, go with God, but go.
Exactly. And you know what? That just goes to show, Eva, that boundaries were even in the Bible.
Yes.
I think so many people get confused with, if you serve God, God is a God of love, God is a God of forgiveness. You have to forgive and love everybody. And, we can get really twisted on that right there. You know,
Yeah.
I remember working at a prison one time. Unfortunately, it was a prison in Texas, Huntsville, Texas, and it had death row, and they still use death row when I worked there. And there would be someone that had literally killed an entire family, and it did not matter how egregious their crimes were, even if there were children, everything. There'd always be people outside protesting, the death of that inmate. And again, like, there comes a point where you have to understand that justice sometimes has to be served to protect, someone who's crossed a line that is so big, that even God himself, there's a point, where God doesn't just keep forgiving and taking you back. The Bible talks about that.
Yes. Oh yeah, because that's exactly what happened to King Saul. God had had enough. And he said, I'm removing my spirit from you. But there's another story, another David story, to remind us of the importance of forgiveness, of letting it go and moving on and getting on with your life and figuring out what has God called you to do and now doing it, instead of sitting over here wallowing in this old story and letting it just run your existence. The story is, of course, David and Bathsheba. And then, of course, God told him, you're going to pay for this through your family. And his whole family did. It fell apart. But years later, his son, his beloved son, Absalom, turned on him. And one of the men who went with Absalom was a man named Ahithophel. Ahithophel was he was an advisor to David. He was one of the greatest men in David's lineup of men. Why? You go, why? Why, Ahithophel? Why? Why would you run off with Absalom and turn on the king the way you did? And then in another book, as you are reading genealogy, you see that Ahithophel was the grandfather of Bathsheba. And you have to wonder, how much anger had he held on to? Had he taken that root of bitterness and buried it so deep in his heart and said, well, I will serve you, but I will never, ever forgive you for this. And in time, it cost him his life. It cost Absalom his life. So
wow, I did not know that.
It's an interesting little tidbit of how anger and bitterness that is not dealt with. It's okay to be angry. I think it's even okay to have a moment of bitterness, like that hurt. That hurt. That was a gut punch. That I didn't see that one coming, And I need to just go over to the corner for a minute and lick my wounds. But after that is done, okay, Lord, we got work to do. And I'm not going to be able to do it sitting over there in the corner licking my wounds. So you tell me where I need to go from here. And in time, God will heal it. But again, doesn't mean you're having Thanksgiving dinner together.
I love that. You don't have to have Thanksgiving dinner. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was great. I love it. I love how we tied that all in with this book. And those of you out there, pick it up. It'll be released do you have a date in May yet, Eva?
May 12th. And you can pre-order it now. And so you'll get the pre-order price. And sometime between this month and next month, they will have it ready for ebook. So you'll be able to pre-order the ebook as well. I don't know why you just can't go ahead and order the ebook. It's not like you got to print it. But I don't understand that part of publishing. I don't know how that part works. I've gotten a lot of, like, when is it going to be out in ebook? And so I asked today, and they said, within the next few weeks. So yay.
Okay, so it'll be on the normal. You can get it on Amazon. Can you pre-order it on Amazon? Okay,
all those places, yes, all those sites, and then
okay,
of course, if you prefer to get your books at a library, please go to your local library and say, look this book up, Miss Beth Betancourt by Eva Marie Everson, and have them order it for you, or your favorite bookstore, your brick and mortar bookstore, because it will be there as well.
Okay. And then I think we wanted to have a little book contest, right? Not a book contest, but a book.
Yeah.
Well, it's a giveaway, a little book giveaway.
How are we going to do it?
Well, I think what we had talked about was, anybody listening, guys, surviving toxic relationships, if you're listening to this, we will have Eva Marie's website on the description on her episode, and then go to her website, and then can they just send you a message saying, I heard you on surviving toxic relationships, in order to be entered?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay.
And we'll give it like 7 days from that date, and I will just put all the names in a hat, so to speak, and then I'll draw a name, and you'll get a free one. And if you go ahead and order the book and send me, hey, I ordered the book, I'll send you a bookmark signed on the back, and
Ooh,
Awesome.
that's exciting.
happy to
I
do
would
that.
love that.
More fun. I was thinking if you do win, you get a free book, you get free recipes.
Yeah, all those
Oh,
recipes
it's a
are in the
win-win.
back. Yeah, it's a win-win.
I,
And
It's a
I'll
win-win.
send you. I will send you the bookmark.
okay, so everybody, you heard it here first. This will be released in April at some point. And when you hear this podcast, if you want to be entered for a free book, then go to the website that is on the description for this podcast and send Eva Marie a message that you heard it here on Surviving Toxic Relationships and you want to be entered for the free book drawing. You will not regret it because not only is it a great book, but those recipes, I cannot wait to make them. They
Yes,
look
and if
amazing.
they, at the same time, if they want to sign up for my newsletter, I send out a Southern newsletter once a month with Southern recipes and Southern words or phrases of the month, and also book recommendations. So I keep it short and sweet, but it's also a lot of fun.
I love that.
Yeah, I've had so much fun with people will send me like, oh, I just heard this Southern saying. Have you ever heard this before? And I'll just add it to the list. So yeah.
Perfect. I love that. And she also has several other books. So while you're checking out this one, check out her other books on her author's page. She's got a lot going on. I don't know how you do all that, Eva Marie. You are a little Wonder Woman there. So
I'm half crazy. Ask anybody who knows me.
Well, we enjoyed our time with you, and we really appreciate you taking the time to visit us.
Well, and let me just say congratulations to you guys. As you know, I am the director of the Selah Awards, and you guys are finalists for podcast. So I will be announcing the winners in May, toward the end of May, at the Blue Ridge Mountains Christian Writers Conference.
Thank you. And we are so excited and we feel so blessed, even just to be a part of the whole Selah process. You know, you go on these journeys and you're like, okay, whatever God wants at this point.
Yes,
you know, it's all about glorifying Him for sure.
We found out
that the judge, the person who judges, we're not allowed to say who it is, but she watches lots and lots of episodes of everything that comes in, and it's quite a list.
I bet.
So finaling is something to be very happy about.
Oh,
thank you.
We're so honored. We're so honored. I mean, to hear that we were in the finale for the Selah Awards we both just, it was a mic drop moment.
Yeah,
it was a mic drop moment. So thank you so much for letting us know. It was, oh my goodness, we're losing our minds here. So
thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And we look forward to seeing you in May again.
All right. See you then.
See ya.
If this conversation spoke to you, share it with someone who needs permission to heal without guilt. And remember, forgiveness is about freeing your heart, not reopening doors God may be asking you to close. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow Surviving Toxic Relationships for more faith-based guidance on recognizing healthy love and hearing God's voice clearly. We will walk this journey with you step by step. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and we hope you have a wonderful day.